Happy Monday, and welcome to another episode of Cases That Should Have Gone to the Supreme Court of Canada, but didn't. Today we're talking about the convoy. Cases that should have gone to the Supreme Court of Canada, but didn't. During the course of the Freedom Convoy, an individual rose to prominence named Artur Pawlowski. And he rose to prominence because he was involved heavily, allegedly, in the Coutts blockade in Alberta. One thing that he was charged with was the offense of counseling mischief on the basis of an attendance at a pub where he gave a speech and encouraged people to hold the line and to, keep the blockade up and continue fighting the government in the context of this. And the criminal code provisions related to mischief have exceptions that include an exception where somebody is not engaging in mischief, but merely telling people perhaps about what their legal rights are, or discussing with them the social issues that are of the day. There are essentially rights that protect, within the context of counseling mischief, free speech as it pertains to these issues. Mr. Pawlowski argued, unsuccessfully, that he was not guilty of mischief because he was simply exercising his free speech rights, and that nobody was holding the line merely because he gave them the directive to do so. The court disagreed. He sought leave to appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada, which was dismissed. And this case does really raise an important issue because protests happen across this country all the time. And while the problems with respect to the Freedom Convoy protests are well documented, and it's well understood why those went beyond the scope of what, sort of legitimate civil disobedience might look like, the case opens the door for people who are engaged in other acts of civil disobedience in the context of protests to effectively be charged with counseling mischief simply by talking to others about how protests will take place, simply by providing information. Because that's all that Mr. Pawlowski argued that he was doing, that he was providing information about the protests and what he believed about them. And as soon as the line in criminal law gets blurred between expressing your opinion and counseling an offense, that is dangerous territory, the type of territory that the Supreme Court of Canada should chime in on, to make a very clear set of rules, a very clear articulable legal test for when your free speech rights are engaged and when you have committed an offense of counseling mischief simply by apparently providing information about plans at a particular protest. And this ruling, leaving it unchallenged as the Supreme Court of Canada has done, and not articulating any test for this to be criminal versus not criminal, exposes people who are vulnerable to overreach by law enforcement, to more harassment by law enforcement. Lots of protests occur in this country by people who are racialized, Indigenous groups, people who are facing poverty, people who have faced discrimination. And those are the people who are more likely to be targeted by police and more likely to face more charges from Crown and receive longer sentences and harsher sentences as a result of those. Recognizing that all of those systemic injustices affect people means that this case actually did, despite the fact that Mr. Pawlowski was found to be guilty and, seemingly more clearly encouraged unlawful conduct, it still required the Supreme Court of Canada the opportunity to consider this because of the long-term implications of leaving this ruling standing as it does. And unfortunately, the Supreme Court of Canada really missed that opportunity in a climate that requires that we have clear direction from our courts to protect protesters against government overreach. Cases that should have gone to the Supreme Court of Canada, but didn't. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Cases That Should Have Gone to the Supreme Court of Canada, but didn't. I'm Kyla Lee at Acumen Law Corporation. Thank you to Brazen Bull Creative for putting together these videos. Please like, subscribe, and share with your friends.